Bleach is a story packed to the brim with fighting. Every fight is guaranteed to have both combatants covered in blood and cuts by the end of the battle. Characters are regularly bisected, gouged, and decapitated. But despite that, I find that Bleach does not glorify violence. In fact, I found that the Arrancar Arc in particular has very overt messages against violence. During this arc, Kubo provides numerous scenarios of combatants fighting, and frequently comments on the worthiness of their battle. I find that there are distinct justifications for fighting that Kubo separates from general violence. Through Ichigo, Bleach consistently lauds fighting to protect others. The problem lies in those who seek battle for self-satisfaction or without purpose. Most interesting is how Kubo punishes those who break these rules in the Arrancar arc, no matter who they are. I find that the reason this concept works so well is because of its relationship to Ichigo, whose main motivation is to protect those around him. It is also closely tied to some of the major themes of Bleach, overcoming fear and the importance of courage. Kubo uses the words and actions of the Soul Reapers to develop his ideas of the proper approach to using force. In his fight against Abiyama Redder, Izuru explains that violence is and needs to be terrifying so that people will fear and try to avoid it. Building off of that, Hisagi presents the idea that those who don't fear the blades they wield don't deserve to wield them. Power is a dangerous tool. Therefore, those with power must be introspective and wary of how they use it. This idea is presented by the very structure of the Gote 13. There are very strict rules on the usage of Zanpakuto and of the conduct of Soul Reapers. Captain-class individuals require permission to fight anywhere near their full powers in the human world because of the damage they can cause to humanity. But Soul Reapers, of course, still fight. And I find that the justice of Soul Reapers lies in Tosen's idea that it's because we know the fear of battle that we are able to grasp our swords and fight for those who also fear battle. Combat is a necessary tool to protect the weak from those who wish to harm them. But if you can't empathize with that weakness, you can't be assured that you're fighting for the right reasons. And since all people have weakness, that understanding can only come through forging bonds with them. Tosen is a prime example of this pitfall. Having lost the one person he loved to the Soul Society, Tosen came to hate them. But in having no connection to the world, to the weak, Tosen had nothing to fear and lost sight of his path, instead using his power to seek meaningless revenge. Tosen's holification makes him stronger and gives him back his physical sight, a stark contrast to this blind pursuit. Hisagi, who truly embodies his values, finishes him with an attack that Tosen easily would have avoided had he not abandoned his self-control to achieve revenge. Tosen is confronted with his old ideology in battle, and forges new bonds with Komamura and Hisagi. The re-establishing of Tosen's connection to others causes him to question his path and remember who he truly is. His actions while working for Aizen are shown to thus be blind, and because he did not fear the consequences of his vengeful actions, instead rationalizing them as justice, Tosen engaged in purposeless conflict, which is the embodiment of violence. This is why Tosen is defeated as an Arrancar, no longer carrying the blade he was unworthy to wield. To fear one's blade is to acknowledge the consequences of acting. Acting thus requires a catalyst to face fear, that catalyst being having something to protect. Acting outside of this construct reflects a lack of self-control, indulging in negative emotions that lead to violence and ultimately self-destruction. Tosen is not the only character to fail to accomplish this, nor is this reserved to antagonists only. Hitsugaya explains to Aizen that a captain fights only out of duty. To swing a sword out of hatred is just violence. Yet Hitsugaya immediately resolves to cut down Aizen because of his betrayal of Hinamori. Because he recklessly charges in, motivated by hatred, he is unaware that he is under the influence of Aizen's Kyoka Suigetsu, and impales Hinamori before being defeated in a single blow, a failure on all counts. Duty is an important theme throughout Bleach that ties in well to these themes of fear and violence. Fighting is justified when it has the right purpose. A Soul Reaper's strength is their duty to protect people. So in throwing away that duty to satisfy his hatred, Hitsugaya's actions are wrong, and he doesn't have the strength to defeat Aizen. Hitsugaya fights for passionate hatred, while Gin and Tosen fight for revenge. The arc even introduces Kaien and Ikkaku as Soul Reapers who fail because they fight for pride. The Soul Reapers then demonstrate that there are many reasons to fight, but not all are just. The one who shows the correct reason to fight is Ichigo, through his actions in Hueco Mundo and his climatic showdown with Aizen. The key to battle is in one's relationships with others. Ichigo's very name means to protect, and protecting others is a fundamental part of his character. Early in the series, we'll learn that Ichigo idolized his mother for protecting him, which in turn inspired him to get stronger and protect others. I think that this is because Ichigo has a deep understanding of fear. He blames himself for the loss of his mother, and is thus incredibly afraid of losing anyone else. He fears the hollow powers within him because of his inability to control them. And because he knows pain, Ichigo will only fight when he has to, which puts him at odds with all of his enemies in Hueco Mundo. His first opponent, Dordoni, advises him to put aside his emotions and become a demon in order to defeat the Espada. However, if Ichigo were to lose his humanity, he would lose his fear, his self-control, and most importantly, his motivation to protect. Unanchored, he'd simply be a vessel of violence, like the enemies he seeks to defeat. Ichigo's first major opponent in this arc is Grimmjow, who might just be the antithesis of his character. While Ichigo becomes stronger through a drive to protect his friends, Grimmjow became powerful by eating his friends and assimilating their power until he was alone. He is a battle-loving maniac who fears nothing and destroys those he should protect. Even during the fight, Ichigo protects Orihime several times, and from her wish to protect him, he draws the strength to defeat Grimmjow. Even then, Ichigo refuses to finish Grimmjow off because he is no longer a threat. Interestingly enough, this concept of protection and violence is even championed by Kenpachi against Noitora. Noitora fights without purpose for the love of combat alone. He has people like Tesla and Nell who legitimately care about him, but he mistreats them and instead seeks a meaningless death on the battlefield. Kenpachi, on the other hand, only really powers up after Noitora attacks Yachiru, so even he is employing the power to protect in this fight. Nell does not recognize Noitora as a warrior because he fights instinctively like a beast, seeking only elation and death. Kenpachi defeats him once he recognizes that he is on the brink of death and decides to live. He uses Kendo, which is not just a structured form of sword fighting, but also the way of the sword that the Soul Reapers embody in the way they live their lives. In using Kendo, Kenpachi is not simply fighting blindly. He is engaging in a more proper form of combat to protect his allies and his life. Noitora, a beast unworthy of the title warrior, is no match for Kenpachi once he embodies these ideals because Noitora fights for nothing. Nell believes that rational beings need a reason to kill, and Kenpachi initially refuses to finish off Ulquiorra and all of his opponents if they cannot fight. This is the same as Ichigo, who proclaims to Grimmjow that it would be better if they were to fight non-death battles. Fighting with an ally is essentially training to make you both more capable of protecting others, giving it a meaningful purpose. Kenpachi doesn't want to kill for no reason, he just wants to fight and get stronger. These two fights drive home the difference between general violence and how Ichigo fights. Whether you are a human, a spirit, or a hollow, seeking to protect others gives one true strength. Ichigo's fight with Ulquiorra further develops this idea by focusing on the heart, one's bonds with others. Protecting this requires marshaling courage and hope to overcome fear. But against Ulquiorra, Orihime gives up the courage to protect Ichigo, and Ichigo gives up hope that he can protect Orihime without losing himself to his power. The way Hollow Ichigo attempts to mutilate Ulquiorra's dying body is in stark contrast to the mercy extended to Grimmjow earlier. And having lost control of himself, Ichigo finds himself attacking Uryu and Orihime, similar to how Hitsugaya attacked Hinamori. Ironically, it is Ulquiorra, who created a bond with Orihime, who gains the courage to protect her from Ichigo at the cost of his life. I feel this fight demonstrates the importance of hope and courage when it comes to fighting. Staying on the right path necessitates fear, but if one only fears, there can be no action. The strong must overcome that through courage, but Ichigo by the end of Hueco Mundo lacks this strength. He loses his hope because he lost to Ulquiorra and to himself. Before Ichigo can go up against Aizen, he has to face his fears and regain his courage. All humans have fear, even Aizen, and the difference between how Ichigo and Aizen handle fear is what determines their battle. Aizen was always exceptional and alone, causing him to fear solitude. Instead of confronting his true self and this fear, Aizen gave up on looking for someone who could understand him. When attacked by the cleanser, Aizen simply destroys it, explaining that fear is caused by reason, which he is trying to move beyond by gaining godlike powers. In effect, Aizen's path is one that rejects fear and understanding others. He uses the Hokokyu, an external device, to achieve this. Ichigo is the exact opposite. Against Ulquiorra, Ichigo also ran away from his fears by giving in to his hollow power and losing his self-control. But against Aizen, Ichigo makes the choice to finally face himself and his fears. And the way Kubo has him do this is by looking internally. Isshin calls out how Ichigo normally evolves through brute force, similar to Aizen. Now, Ichigo can only move forward by facing the parts of himself he has been avoiding. I love how Ichigo's fight against Ulquiorra is used to full effect here. Zangetsu points out that Ichigo's inner world has been consumed by his grief because he lost his hope. To bounce back, Ichigo needs to find his courage again. Rather than defeating Tenga Zangetsu in combat, Ichigo wins by taking a blow that is symbolic of him accepting his innate powers instead of fearing them. By doing this, he also accepts Zangetsu's will, which is to protect Ichigo, making the final Getsuga Tensho a manifestation of the power to protect, a power that can only be gained by a recognition and acceptance of one's fear, by regaining hope to protect others, one's heart. Furthermore, the cost of this great power is Ichigo's Soul Reaper abilities, the tool he uses to protect others. Faced with his worst fear, losing the ability to protect, Ichigo shows true inner strength by overcoming those fears for the sake of his town. Ichigo suggests that the Hokokyu strips Aizen of his power, because he really wished to be normal and understandable to others. Rather than look within and face this truth, Aizen neglects to connect with others and runs from his fears using external means, embarking on a path of meaningless violence. While rereading the Arrancar arc, it jumped out to me just how prevalent these themes on violence are. In the end, I found that Kubo was making a distinct statement about battle, differentiating how Ichigo approaches fighting to the purposeless violence that the Espada seek. Yet at the same time, Kubo uses the stories of several Soul Reapers, like Aizen, Kaien, Hitsugaya, and Tosen, to show that violence in service of vain pursuits, like vengeance or pride, are equally destructive. It isn't simply that the protagonists are allowed to fight because they are the good guys. If they stray from the path of duty and self-control, losing their respective violence, they are equally prone to failure. The deeply graphic nature of Bleach makes this theme work. Violence is brutal in Bleach, emphasizing that one who chooses that hell must be doing so for the right reasons, lest they become villains themselves. In the end, one must not seek out violence. It is something that comes out of a need to protect someone, to protect the heart. Because of fear, people find the courage and hope to overcome it. Only when overcoming that fear can one be assured that their battle is just. Ichigo's fight in the Arrancar arc is a battle to maintain his own hope, to ensure that he has the strength to protect everything.